Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Well, another week and we have more great news to share. More Montanans are working than ever before. Fewer Montanans are unemployed than ever recorded in the state. Our state's unemployment rate is the lowest it's ever been on record and is now the fourth lowest unemployment rate in the country. And in just the last week, a study ranked Montana the best state for doctors to practice medicine. As the session rolls on, we'll continue working to tear down barriers for healthcare professionals to practice here in the state of Montana and build a more robust provider network. Ultimately, our goal is to increase Montanans' access to quality healthcare. Above all, our key focus remains creating greater opportunity for Montanans and protecting our way of life. And we've made great progress. I was proud to join Republican legislators on the Capitol steps just a couple weeks ago when we fulfilled our promise to provide Montanans with the largest tax cut in state history. Together, we delivered Montanans at every income level tax relief. And we also paid off all the state debt, so Montana is now debt-free. And we're just getting started. Montanans in every corner of our state tell me they're concerned about housing prices. The shortage of affordable, attainable housing throughout our state is one of the biggest issues facing Montanans. When it comes down to it, the health and well-being of our families, our communities, and our businesses, and our economy rely on access to affordable and attainable housing. For at least the last 12 years, however, it's become more and more difficult for Montanans to own a home. The demand for more housing has grown for more than a decade, and home building just hasn't kept up. After years of doing the same thing over and over again, it's critical that we chart a new course. We can't keep doing the same thing. The state can't, and local governments can't. We must change our approach to housing in Montana. This is a bipartisan issue. While we may disagree on other issues, many Montanans, regardless of party, believe we need to increase the supply of housing. Building high-density housing, like the site I visited yesterday in Missoula, is part of the solution. I was proud to stand alongside strong pro-housing advocates and leaders, 2 city council members from Missoula and a former Democrat legislator, a former Republican legislator, and a home builder. They all know how to get out of this hole. First, we stop digging, and then we do something different. Yesterday, I learned that most of Missoula does not allow lower-cost multifamily housing or accessory dwelling units. And the project we visited, which was an apartment building, the permitting delays on that project alone that took 7 months to get the building permits added $700,000 to the cost of that building, driving up the cost of housing. I appreciated the input from the group and their leadership and the way we were able to come together around this issue that's so important for Montanans, because ultimately solving this crisis is going to take all of us. That's why I stood up the diverse bipartisan housing task force last year. I again thank the members of this task force, including Senators Ellie Boldman and Greg Hertz, House Majority Leader Sue Vinton, and former Representative Danny Tenenbaum. They and all the members of the task force delivered strategies to address our state's long-standing shortage of housing, and they're making their way through the legislature now. I look forward to working with the legislators to get our pro-housing reforms to my desk so I can sign them into law. Ultimately, to ramp up housing capacity here in Montana, we also need more skilled workers. Now more than ever, Montana needs plumbers and carpenters, electricians and welders, masons and machinists. Now more than ever, Montana needs a highly skilled workforce, which is why we created the Montana Trades Education Credit in 2021. As we anticipated, Montana employers are taking advantage of this program to upskill their workforce. And our proposed budget, which is in front of the legislature now, expands this successful program and builds the skills of hardworking Montanans to increase housing supply and build a stronger future. We also adopted one of the task force strategies in our budget, the HOMES program, which stands for Home Ownership Means Economic Security. Carried by Representative Mike Hopkins of Missoula, the HOMES program invests $200 million from our surplus to expand water and sewer infrastructure and ultimately expand housing capacity throughout the state. Let's get the HOMES program across the finish line so we can increase the supply of housing and get more Montanans into a home they can afford. We've also focused on cutting red tape that drives up housing costs and also on removing unnecessary roadblocks to home ownership. Senator Forrest Mandeville is leading a bill to cut red tape, streamline permitting, and require local jurisdictions to adopt a host of pro-housing reforms. Let's get it done. And there's a host of other bills before the legislature now that will remove unnecessary roadblocks to home ownership, like Senator Greg Hertz's bill to give landowners more freedom to build affordable starter homes by allowing accessory dwelling units. A family should be able to build an accessory dwelling unit. This is a smaller, more accessible home or an in-law suite on their existing property. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, will help grandparents who may want to live closer to or even with their children and grandchildren. Unfortunately, many zoning regulations have shut them down. It's time to open them back up so grandma and grandpa can spend more quality time with their family and age in place there. This will make our families and communities stronger. Let's get it done. We should also give landowners more freedom to build new homes in urban areas with Senator Daniel Zolnikoff's bill. Senator Zolnikoff's measure will help us increase housing supply and protect rural areas and ag land from sprawl. This is a win-win for Montanans. Let's get it done. We must also allow for more dense housing in urban areas by ending exclusionary zoning. Ending exclusionary zoning will increase access to starter homes like duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and condos, as well as apartments. Senator Jeremy Trebus's bill will do just that. Let's get it done. Everyone agrees now is the time for bold, transformational pro-housing reform. Housing is a priority for Montanans. Let's deliver. Let's get these pro-housing reforms across the finish line. Montanans are counting on us. Let's get it done. Montanans are also counting on us to be good stewards of their hard-earned dollars, and our budget for Montana families delivers. As you all know, there's a lot in our budget for Montana families. We've put forth our proposals, sought legislative input, and now our budget is making its way through the process. While our budget is historic for its tax cuts, providing tax relief to Montanans at every income level, it's also fiscally responsible, encourages job creation, protects our way of life, and invests in a stronger Montana. After returning $1 billion to taxpayers, we're using our remaining surplus like Montana families would, paying off our debt, repairing what needs fixing, and saving for a rainy day. It's a monumental day for a family when they pay off their debt, whether it's a credit card, a car payment, or a mortgage. It was equally exciting when we made Montana debt-free in 23, just a few weeks ago. We got it done. Now, we're repairing what needs fixing, just like any Montana family would. We've proposed $300 million generational investment in our behavioral health care facilities, and Representative Keenan and Senator Esp are leading the effort in the legislature to get this over the finish line. With it, we'll repair the state hospital, improve patient services, and better secure the safety of patients and providers. And will support expanded community-based behavioral health clinics. Let's get it done. We also put forth nearly $200 million to repair and ultimately expand capacity at the Montana State Prison. I appreciate Representative Mike Hopkins for his leadership on this issue. I was encouraged to see the House legislators moving this bill forward. Let's get it done. And like any Montana family, we're saving for emergencies. I'm encouraged that our proposal to more than double the state's rainy day fund to guard against economic uncertainty and risk passed its first committee on Monday. It's critical we get this across the finish line, and I appreciate Representative Lou Jones for carrying it. Let's get it done. To reduce disaster risk for Montana families and communities, we've also proposed the Local Disaster Resiliency Fund, which Representative Larry Brewster is championing. The fund will allow us to leverage state dollars for up to 9-to-1 federal match. This is critical to the health and safety of Montanans throughout the state. Let's get it done. To combat wildfire risk, we're working to increase the fire suppression fund to protect Montanans, their homes, their livelihoods, and their properties. Let's get this done. Our fiscally responsible budget also invests in building stronger families and safer communities. To make Montana communities safer, we've made investing in law enforcement a top priority. And I'm hopeful the Senate will fund the new highway patrol troopers, prosecutors, and criminal investigators Attorney General Knudsen and I proposed and our state needs. Let's get this done. To support families and kids, we also need to make it easier for Montanans to open their happy, healthy, loving homes to children. To get more children into homes where they can reach their full potential, we've proposed an adoption tax credit. And Representative Courtney Sprunger is making great progress with her bill to do just that. Let's get it done. While we're at it, let's continue promoting stronger Montana families with our conservative, pro-family, $1,200 per child tax credit. It'll make a real difference for growing families raising their kids here in Montana, especially as rising costs continue chipping away at their paychecks at all income levels. I appreciate Representative Josh Kazmaier for championing this conservative, pro-family reform. Let's get it done. And to support low and fixed income Montana homeowners whose paychecks are being stretched thinner and thinner due to inflation, we proposed reforming the state's property tax assistance program. I thank Representative George Nikolakos. Let's get it done. Sorry, George. Together, we'll keep moving forward on Montana's priorities. Let's get opening the doors of greater opportunity so more folks can prosper. Because ultimately, Montanans sent us to Helena to address their priorities, help them thrive, and make it easier for them to achieve the American dream. So let's get it done. With that, I'd be happy to take some questions. Who'd like to be first? Yes.
Governor, you talked just now about Montana being a place where healthcare providers would want to work, where they want to come and practice. We've heard a lot of concern from healthcare providers around a couple of bills this session that would further regulate healthcare that can be offered in Montana, specifically SB 99 that would engender for Medicare. I'm curious what you'd say to healthcare providers about those concerns.
Yeah, so there's a lot of bills moving through the legislature. I was proud to get the recognition that this is one of the best states in the country to practice medicine. And our priorities in healthcare have really been to increase access to care, and we'll continue to promote those priorities. Yes?
Eric Hitchcock from the press. I want to ask about housing. So I hear you talk a lot about market rate housing reforms, and things that would try to make more houses available at market rates. I don't hear you talk as much about programs or bills out there that would expand like the programs the Montana Affordable Housing that try to increase the supply of housing that's available rent restrict the rates for people that aren't going to be able to afford market rate housing. There are proposals out there that might make the rate invest and put more state money into those programs. How are you thinking about those proposals?
Yeah, so our approach, we've been really clear. We have a housing shortage. The demand is outstripping supply. Our focus is on increasing supply and removing restrictions that prevent affordable housing from being built. And it's pretty simple, Eric, that given the magnitude of the problem, there is not enough money in the state budget to subsidize housing in a way that would be meaningful across the entire state. But here's what will make a difference. When zoning requires that bigger houses be built on bigger properties, they're more expensive. When you allow smaller houses on smaller properties or even higher density through duplexes or condos or trade homes on smaller lots, houses cost less and they're more attainable. So the focus of our administration is really to increase supply through expanding our trades workforce, removing the restrictions, so like the developer yesterday doesn't have to wait 7 months. That added $700,000 to his project and ultimately required him to set higher rents for those properties. So that's the focus that we have. Is there an online? Yeah. Hi, Mara.
Hey, Governor Jane Fortin. Thanks for doing this. What are your thoughts on Senate Bill 99?
Okay, so there's a lot of bills moving through the legislature. I understand that's on its way to my desk, but hasn't made it yet. And when it does, we'll give it careful consideration.
One follow-up on that, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, since it's very similar to some of the bills that you that were working their way through the legislature last session, you heard from constituents about those bills last session, and I'm assuming that you've heard from constituents so far this session as well. What are you hearing from people about that bill?
Well, in any bill that comes to us, and again, there's still, I think, 1,500 bills working their way through the process, there are many facets. It's extremely important we take the input of constituents and hear from all sides. We look at the fiscal impact of these bills, and that analysis has not been completed by our office, so I'll just wait to give you specific comment until we get all the information together.
Respectfully, Governor. Sorry.
Thanks, Mara. We'll go to Holly.
I'm curious, sort of similar to that of Shaylee's, you mentioned looking at the fiscal impact. When you're weighing these bills, I'm wondering when you hear people testifying saying that there'll be litigation against the legislation if it were to pass, is that something you're weighing as you're considering signing or not?
If we had concerns about the constitutionality of any bill, sure, that would weigh into our decision. But it's important that we hear the voice of Montanans on this. We've been hearing from people on all sides of this issue, and ultimately we'll make the best decision, giving it full consideration when we actually get the bill.
Have you looked at the legal concerns with 99 specifically?
We have not completed the analysis on it. Yes, Jonathan.
Thank you, Governor. I was curious, you spoke about the $300 million investment in behavioral health. The bill from Representative Keenan had a hearing yesterday. It sounded like some of the lawmakers that we heard from were sort of looking for maybe a little more detail than is in there right now about how that money might be used. I was curious if you could comment on kind of where the administration, when it seems like you guys went with very open rather than being a little more definite with how that money might be used.
Yeah, it's not easy to spend $300 million, so we will not have all of our plans nailed down by the end of the legislature. This is why we propose a commission, very much like what we did for the ARPA funds, that would be made up of legislators who ultimately have the appropriations authority as well as officials from DPHHS. But the priorities have been clear. The situation at the state hospital in Warm Springs is unacceptable. We need to upgrade those facilities to ensure safety of both patients and the providers. That's number one. And then the experts tell us that behavioral health clinics that are community-based allow us to provide services where patients can be closer to family. Many of them were shut down by prior administrations. This $300 million investment is going to allow us to bring those services back so we can provide behavioral health services in the local community. Those are the guiding lights for the $300 million. We'll then use the commission that the bill establishes to make real-time decisions between sessions with full oversight from the legislature, but allow us to dot all the I's and cross the T's to make sure the money's being spent well.
If I may follow up briefly, there was also some questions about the form of the commission. Are you wedded to the way that it is now, or are you open to having some additional voices added to that?
So I haven't been involved in the specific discussions there. I think the model we used for ARPA works well, where it was a majority legislature, minority administration. That allowed them to preserve their appropriations authority, which they have under the Constitution, and yet continue for us to make decisions in between legislative sessions.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Do we have any others online?
Can we go to
Okay, yeah, Shaylee.
Thanks, Governor. I have a question about fiscal impact. So looking at Senate Bill 458, I know your budget office did a fiscal analysis, and then we got somewhat of a conflicting analysis from the Legislative Fiscal Division showing that there could be a possible impact to like $7.5 billion of federal funding. That's the bill that would define sex in Montana code. I'm curious what you make of the Legislative Fiscal Division's fiscal note on that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. We're still waiting for the bill. If it gets to us, we'll consider it.
I guess I'm just thinking about like the Department of Corrections being an agency, like executive agencies have now contributed to this fiscal analysis. Have you talked with like Director Gukin about that or any of those things?
Yeah, we're taking input from the agencies, from Montana constituents, from the legislators, and we'll consider all that if the bill gets to me. Yes.
Hi, Nicole Gritton with the Daily Montana. Thank you for doing this. You said in your remarks that funding law enforcement was a top priority for you. I saw that yesterday the two bills on PL 280 were tabled in committee, and I was wondering if your administration had any update on the plan moving forward on funding law enforcement under PL 280.
Yeah, so our administration's been actively involved in trying to resolve this situation. The Lieutenant Governor has traveled up to Lake County on a number of occasions to sit down. That arrangement under PL 280 is the only one in the state. It doesn't exist with any of the other tribal governments. We're watching the deliberations in the legislature closely, and we'll see what ends up getting to us. We need to get a resolution because we need to have, law enforcement has to be properly funded. Yes, Eric.
I'm going to ask about SB 152, the kind of the flagship red tape relief bill on
Yep.
election reform. That came out of committee as a much slimmer bill than it went into committee. Just wanted to see if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, so House Bill 152, this is the Title 37 reform. The heart and soul of that bill, and you're right, I've called it the keystone of our red tape relief effort. So this is something we've probably put more effort in terms of outreach into that bill than any of the other 187 red tape relief bills. So it's extremely important to us. We had a good discussion with the majority leadership this week about that. And just for the record, the Lieutenant Governor and her team sent 1.7 million email exchanges with industry folks to collect input. We've had 5 public hearings. We've made many changes to the 152 based on the input of industry. So I am hopeful, given the outreach and the significance, and the heart of the bill really would allow people who have licenses in other states to practice in Montana on a probationary period while they fully certify in Montana, if those other states have standards of licensing at least equal to Montana. This is part of our workforce shortage. This would allow nurses and healthcare professionals, teachers and others. There's, I think, over 30 industry categories that this bill addresses. That's why it got so big. My own impression talking to some of the committee members is that it was so big it was hard to digest. We're hopeful as this bill moves through the process, we can put back in some of the reforms that would allow us to reduce the red tape so people can actually get to work in Montana. Yeah. Yes.
Alice, Montana Public Radio. We've seen a couple of bills brought that would redistribute marijuana tax revenue funding on the Senate and the House side. Earlier this week, we saw House Appropriations table the bill that enacted a lot of the redistribution that you had in your budget. I'm curious if you have any comments or thoughts on that.
Sure. We have provided record funding for Habitat for Montana, and I've confirmed with FWP that the program is fully funded, literally at record levels. Given that, as important as conservation is, and it's a top priority for us, we have proposed to use the revenue from marijuana to deal with some of the problems that are caused by marijuana, namely addiction recovery, complicated by mental health services, and I think that's prudent for us to do that. So we'll continue to work with the legislature, and we'll see where we end up.
Thank you.
Yeah, one online. Yep.
Hey, Governor, it's Mara again.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the solutions that the legislature has been working on about senior and long-term care services, particularly for nursing homes and assisted living facilities. The rate increases that the health committee, the health subcommittee have advanced are one part of that, but what else do you have your eye on for the rest of the session?
Yeah, in our dialogue with the providers in the state, I mean, the number one issue is these reimbursement rates. We proposed record increases in funding. I know the legislature is considering even higher numbers. I think the important point is both the legislature and our administration agree that we need to raise the rates. Where we end up, I'm not sure. We'll see as the bill makes it through the legislative process. Yes, Holly.
I'm wondering your thoughts, and I don't have the bill number off the top of my head, but a speaker adheres bill to have the legislature pretty much take over all the Capitol except for you retain most of your office space, and then have control of that Capitol complex area as well. Sort of wondering if you have thoughts or concerns about the implications of that.
I've spoken with the speaker about this. We do have some concerns about the proposal, in large part because it's not clear all the logistics have been worked out, and we'll continue that dialogue. And it's but suffice it to say, we have some concerns. Yes, online. Hi, Mara.
Hey again. I'm just going to circle back to this one more time since we have the opportunity. I've talked to a couple of parents and families who say that they're considering moving out of state because of Senate Bill 99, because they wouldn't be able to access the care that they need for their kids, for their adolescents. What do you say to those families?
I've met with transgender parents, transgender children. We need to make sure everybody's voice is heard as we make a decision on this bill when it gets to my desk, and we're still collecting that input. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Have a great weekend and week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for your time.